Welcome to the Ben and Lauren Show. I'm Ben, and here's Lauren. And we skipped a Saturday, didn't we?
We did. We were watching Dustin and Cassie's show, and then we were going to do ours.
It got later and later.
Got later and later. My stamina is fading as we get closer to due date.
Yeah. Speaking of due date, it's either Monday or Tuesday, right?
I think it's Tuesday. Due dates are 40 weeks plus 1 day. Or 40 weeks on Monday.
So today is Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We're down to the last 3 days.
This is the latest we've ever gone with any baby except Daniel, who was 10 days late. Which, while I don't really enjoy this stage of pregnancy, this very, very end of it, I'm really hoping we go kind of late.
Rather than early?
Well, here's the thing. We're practically on top of the due date. And if we haven't had the baby by now, I'd really like to get through at least the first couple of days of Sukkot when it's expected to be 39 degrees outside.
We're wondering if the baby comes right on time and it's cold in our tent, how we're going to keep the baby, what we're going to do. Well, either way, no matter what, the baby's going to be well taken care of.
We may not be able to sleep out in the tent during the 39-degree weather if we have a newborn because they don't regulate their temperature all that.
Or we might have heaters and insulation and creative.
I don't know how we can insulate the tent.
Blankets. I don't know. We could.
We'll have to. This has been something that's been something of a discussion all week as we get closer and closer.
We're going to bury it in popcorn and peanuts. Cover it with blankets.
We want the baby to survive and be able to breathe.
Well, no, not cover the baby. Cover the tent.
Oh, cover the tent. As we're getting closer to due date, we also get closer to the weather report for Sukkot.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears that we aren't really going to get above, 65 degrees? We have one 65-degree day.
It's going to be chilly.
And the weather at night is pretty much going to consistently be around 40 degrees.
So we have the tent all set up and decorated.
We do.
Tomorrow we're going to finish and put up our canopy.
We've gone through a 35-degree night before in this tent. And there's a lot of things that I learned to do differently next time we had to do that. So hopefully we will have the benefit of this. But a newborn in the mix is something we've never encountered before. So we're still up in the air how we're going to handle that if and when we have to. But I've had similar situation to Daniel. I was kind of in labor on and off for about a week before Daniel. Basically, I would experience labor symptoms during the night, and then during the day they would go away and it would be normal. And I've had a lot of that this week as well.
Mm-hmm.
So probably sometime in the next week, I'm thinking.
During Sukkot.
Yeah, we're going to hit Sukkot. And if Jesus was really born, if Yeshua was really born during Sukkot.
There are some people who theorize that Yeshua was born on the first day of Sukkot. Other people say it was on the Feast of Trumpets.
I'm not sure he could have been born the first day of Sukkot. You know why? Well, here's the thing. Joseph and Mary were traveling that day.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to find a place to stay. It would have been a Sabbath the first day of Sukkot.
Right, and they would have already been, you're right, they wouldn't have found a place to stay on a Sabbath.
So either they had missed the first day of Sukkot already, or it was a few days before it was somewhere between Atonement and Sukkot, or it was the Feast of Trumpets.
Trumpets actually makes a little more sense.
Even then, it's a Sabbath. They couldn't have been traveling on that day. Of course, the Bible's a little mysterious about that. It says that while they were there, the time came for her to be delivered.
Mm-hmm.
So we always see the story as, they barely got into the stable in time for that baby to be born. But for all we know, they were actually there for a day or two.
Yeah, who knows? We don't really know the whole timeline exactly.
Anyway.
So
this baby's hitting about the same time of year that Messiah was born.
I think that's kind of neat. Presumably, we don't really know for sure.
The way I feel right now, I've got a lot of sympathy for Mary traveling at that point. She's a tough cookie.
We thought we would have a close call in Sukkot before, didn't we, with Daniel?
It wasn't that we would have a close call. That year
So
we
you
didn't travel out to Arkansas because I was 36 weeks
Mm-hmm.
with Daniel. And I thought, the effort of setting up camp and being on the mountain and the long drive, and it has a pretty good chance of sending someone into early labor.
And you didn't want to go into early labor on the mountain in the
Well,
cold in a tent, far away from home.
We have a 4 weeks premature baby.
Mm-hmm.
Being born in a tent without the midwife that we're used to. Now, granted, there's other people there who could help, but it wouldn't be an ideal situation.
It would be one not soon forgotten, that's for sure.
Michael Leger thought it would be fun. It's like, well, you aren't the one having the baby.
Fun.
Well, he said, hey, that'd be great, new baby, you know, and I'm like,
no. In theory, maybe, not in practice.
No. That's why we're not there now.
So 2 weeks, we should have tons of stuff to talk about, right? We kind of sat here and reviewed and thought, what did we do the past 2 weeks?
It goes like this. Prepare, then a Sabbath. Then a day where we scramble around and get all kinds of stuff done. Then prepare for another Sabbath and rest. And do it all over again.
Go, stop, go, stop. Go real fast. Stop completely.
Well, we've had the regular weekly Sabbaths interspersed with the holiday Sabbaths.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a lot of...
been very broken up.
Add that to baby preparations, and we've just got a lot of preparing going on.
Well, like Day of Atonement, we really got things prepared for Day of Atonement, and then it really felt like a Sabbath. And then everything kind of starts up again. We have 2 days, and then it's another Sabbath again.
Right.
That same kind of thing.
You and I went out on Monday evening.
Yeah, that was nice. That was very nice. We enjoyed that.
Yeah, our friend Charlene surprised us last week, and she's like, well, you've got 1 week. You can go out sometime this week. And we said, well,
we'll take it.
We'll take Monday.
We'll take it. So we went out. We went to our usual place. We went to Partridge Creek.
We're very boring people, I think.
We go to the mall. That's our big date night.
Okay, it's an outdoor mall.
It's an outdoor mall.
And we took a long walk. It was a nice night, actually. We just
gorgeous.
needed sweaters.
Wasn't too busy.
It was actually quite empty. I was surprised.
Mm-hmm. We stopped at Cooper's Hawk. Had a desert wine.
You mean dessert wine?
Desert wine and chocolate cake.
Yep, it was good. It was very nice.
Dessert wine. What else did we do? That was it.
You bought a cappuccino mug.
Oh, yeah.
So you can make coffee in a big giant mug.
I've been, little by little, we get the little cappuccino mug, or the little espresso mug, cappuccino mug. These are all accessories to go with our coffee maker, espresso maker.
We actually have been giving the espresso maker a fair amount of use.
We use it quite a bit. I like it.
Yeah.
Espresso is really tasty.
Well, I found if I use decaf coffee in there, that I can actually make drinks out of it without...
I probably wouldn't get as much indigestion if I use decaf.
Well, you might get less indigestion if you didn't try drinking a shot of espresso, a double shot of espresso, and then you have to have a cup of coffee afterward.
Yeah, that would be about 3 cups of coffee. I'm a 1 cup of coffee guy.
He drinks the little double shot of espresso, and he feels like, well, I haven't really had a cup of coffee, so he makes pour-over coffee, and he has a whole cup of coffee. I'm like, your caffeine intake is really getting high here.
Well, I'm feeling really tired tonight. It's not like it was an active day today. Saturdays never are, but...
Well, we had company this morning. The Jehovah's Witness friends we have who used to come by for Bible study every week stopped by.
It was kind of a surprise
visit. For a few minutes.
That was really nice.
It was nice to see them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went to Bible study, and we had a long study today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did go late, didn't it?
Which was nice also. It was a good discussion.
I like it when the conversations go back and forth. It's not just,
We spent a lot of time, we talked about Sukkot, about Feast of Tabernacles, and about different ways you can approach celebrating it. The philosophies of how different people celebrate it.
Yeah, we look at it from the perspective of you were to celebrate in booths to remember when the children of Israel were in the wilderness. Whereas I think there's also the view of being a type and shadow of the Messianic reign, the wedding banquet of the
Right.
Lamb. So either way, it's a celebration. I mean, you're commanded to celebrate.
Right. And be joyful.
And be joyful. But if we're going to remember when the children of Israel lived in booths, I think we try to sort of celebrate by remembering the children of Israel living in booths.
Right. Some people, because the command is to live to dwell in a temporary dwelling place. So some people will go, there'll be a big gathering of people and they'll stay at a hotel or, cabins, or they'll stay at slightly nicer accommodations because their focus is they're remembering that this is a preview of the wedding supper of the Lamb, and the idea is to have a great celebration, to save up all your tithe money over the course of the year and use that to, as the Bible puts it, to buy anything your heart desires, and basically to have a huge celebration in honor of a wedding banquet that is to come. It's like a wedding feast.
And I can see that. There's a lot of implications that Sukkot is a big celebration of, if trumpets is the coronation of the king and the king coming, and atonement is a significant event after he comes.
It is the righting of the wrongs, the judging of the nations.
And then you're going to have the nations coming in and celebrating Sukkot at Jerusalem.
Right. So even our view of, we're memorializing what it would be like to live in the wilderness in tents or in very temporary dwellings, not in houses, in some degree of, you're going away from the comfort of a settled home or a settled place. You still are commanded to be joyful and eat rich food and enjoy.
It's also important to remember that the commandment is not to go out into the wilderness and camp, but to camp in Jerusalem, which would be the equivalent of like a city,
And to invite each other to meals, to invite the Levites, to invite poor people, to invite orphans, to invite anybody you can to share the time with you, to share the celebration.
It's also special if you can imagine like a whole community of tents of all like-minded people or similar-minded people, and you can go from tent to tent, and they'd welcome you in and say, hey, have a glass of wine, or hey, try these pomegranates, they're delicious.
We've experienced that a little bit. Meaning we've experienced it in that we've had a smallish community
where you can visit camps from one to the other. What I remember, though,
would be in Jerusalem would have been massive compared to that.
Well, what I remember is working a lot.
But that's part of it.
Keeping the tents, keeping things clean, keeping things up. I mean, we were totally out of our element and totally new routine of maintaining the camp.
You mean the times when we've actually gone away and done
When we've
camping?
gone away, yeah. When we're home, it's a lot easier. It's actually not that hard.
Right. When we're home, though, there's not people really to visit.
Yeah. So we have to invite people. We have to find people and say, come to our sukkah.
So anyway, we talked a lot at Bible study today about the different philosophies of approaching how to celebrate this holiday. And the people we study with, to them, they have gatherings all around the world of people that come from the church that they used to belong to, and they gather with them every year. They have a feast site, they call it, and basically it's almost like a conference. Everyone gets together and they have teachers. And
I just realized that we are going to have a feast Sunday night right here at the house.
Hopefully. Unless we have a new baby tomorrow.
Well, yeah. Lauren invited her family over, and extended family, so we're going to have quite a few people here.
We normally go to my parents' house on Sunday night, and my dad loves to cook for everybody. He's becoming quite a chef. And I called him up and I said, Dad, do you think maybe you could come over here tomorrow?
But by inviting your dad, you're also inviting your whole family and our extended family.
My sister and her family.
So, well, how many people is that? Do we do the math on that, including our family? It's got to be at least 70.
10 plus 5 plus... no.
Okay, maybe not 70.
It's about 20.
25.
No, 20.
When you count all the children and...
I counted everybody.
Okay, 20?
I think we're at 20 people. This baby will make it 21.
Okay. Well, 21. That's quite a few people to invite over.
Well, you figure Benjamin and Leah have 4 children. And we have 4 children. So
they're a family of 6 and we're a family of 7.
Right. My family used to be a family of 10, but then you have to take me and Leah out. So it's a family of 8.
Okay. So Benjamin and Leah and our family, that's a total of 13?
No, we have 6 and 6 right now.
No, 6 and 7.
You can't count the new baby.
Oh, okay.
So 6 and
Okay,
6
so
is
we're
12.
12.
Then we have 8 in my family.
Okay.
That's 20.
20. You're right. Okay.
gonna have to
Now,
have you do those
what if-
math sheets that
now what do we-
Abigail's doing.
Well, what do we do if my parents come over and Jenny's over and she brings Addie and Kim comes over with Steven and the 3 cousins?
Well, if they all came over for dinner, I would be shocked because, for one thing, they like to plan stuff to do on Sunday evening.
Oh, okay.
I suspect we'll visit with them during the day more.
Mm-hmm.
They're welcome to come over and we have dessert and whatever. But my guess is that they're going to be busy tomorrow. A lot of times Kim and Steven have stuff, people they meet with on the weekend when they're here.
Well, I'll be happy to make lots of cappuccinos for people.
In case you didn't pick up our internal dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
Ben's sister and her husband are in from Florida this week.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of adds to the the
So,
busyness of this week.
We've got out-of-town company. We've got the fall feasts, specifically Sukkot,
the imminent arrival of
and
a
the
baby.
imminent arrival of a baby any day now.
So I haven't been sleeping at night. Because I have random labor symptoms all night.
You know how they say there's a perfect storm where one front comes down and confronts another one? Well, this is a super perfect storm because we have 3 fronts all colliding into one.
Yeah, Mom said that, your mom said when Kim was coming to town, I'm like, oh my. They were a little busy.
You know we have the holy days and a baby coming right about that exact time,
And she's
right?
like, oh yeah, that'll be great. They're like, that's gonna be crazy.
We'll manage it just fine. We're happy that she's here.
Yep. They're really, I think, well, your mom at least is really hoping we have the baby while Kim is here. I wouldn't mind having the baby while Kim is here.
If
It's
Kim's
just
here an entire week, then we are likely to have a baby while she's here.
the whole logistics of the entire situation are pretty amazing.
This baby would have to be at least 6 days late or more.
Daniel was 10 days late.
That's true. If the baby's late, we can handle that.
So you can really tell what's been occupying our minds.
When's this baby coming?
Well, not only that, just trying to organize everything all together.
So we were talking about Sukkot, and it turns out that your family, we're going to have a whole bunch of people here for the first day of Sukkot to kick it off. And we'll spend some time in the sukkah, and we're getting it all decorated tomorrow. We've got straw bales, not hay bales, straw bales.
Yeah, my sister and her husband worked on a party for my parents for their 40th anniversary, and they had all these straw bales to decorate with. And they're like, can you use these? And we said, yeah, we'll use them.
We can use them to sit on. We can use them. We're going to use them in our garden as a mulch.
Well, I'm really excited to have some for the garden this year.
Mm-hmm. So that's very useful for us.
Yep.
And I went on a trip out to gather them. Our vehicle doesn't hold a whole lot.
We have a small vehicle for what we use it for.
So I figured I'd at least be able to bring back 6. They had 12 altogether. And I managed to cram on 8.
Yeah, you and Benjamin got
Benjamin
8
and
in
I
there.
got 8 in there. So there was, if you can imagine, 3 stuffed in there with 2 on top, and then 3 more on a trailer in the back.
It was a pretty epic packing job. Now we have to vacuum our whole car, though. The kids got in there like, Mom, there's straw stuck in the ceiling.
There's straw everywhere.
There's straw everywhere. We got to vacuum out. So we'll have
Sukkot
those
project.
around.
Speaking of Sukkot projects, hopefully get the
We're still
fence.
working on getting the fence finished.
It's getting further along. I'm on my 3rd hole. Just need another pole, and the rest will go real fast.
Well, what seems to happen is you're really busy all week, and then on Sunday, you have to work on doing that. But then there's been other yard projects going on as well. So
Sundays have been my...
you cut down one of the peach trees last week.
Yeah. We used to have
Which is
2
not
peach
hard
trees.
It's hard to do, but necessary.
One of the peach trees is gone now.
The girls were quite sad. They've gotten over it.
Abigail said the first branch I cut off was her favorite branch. I'm
Can't cut that off. It's my favorite branch.
we're cutting the whole tree
the
down.
whole tree's coming down.
Can't leave the branch. But then she said she was happy because I saved it for her.
Oh.
So now she's walking around
So
the
now
yard with it.
Is that the one that she's been walking around with? Okay.
Her favorite branch.
Her favorite branch. She's going to be really sad if it disappears.
We might be burning it at a campfire.
It's pretty green to burn.
Might not be by the time it's by in a few more days.
It takes weeks for those to...
Oh, wow. We've got lots of cherry wood to burn.
Yep.
We have cherry wood and peach wood.
Our fruit trees. Well.
We are keeping our apple tree and our sweet cherry tree.
The others we're taking down to give room to them, give room to our garden, and because we don't really have room for the fruit trees. They don't get enough nutrients. They don't get enough sunshine. They don't get enough space. There's just all kinds of issues.
But it's just so sad taking your fruit tree down.
I know.
It's never bore fruit that we've enjoyed. Anyway.
The peach tree hasn't. The peach tree is 8 years old.
Yeah, after 8 years and not getting any fruit from it.
And some of those years we deliberately weren't going to use the fruit, but even those years we didn't get fruit off it. So the last 3 years we should have gotten fruit, and we did put a fairly concerted effort into making it bear, and we can't get it to bear. So? Without the use of a lot of chemicals, which probably are better not sprayed around in our garden and on our neighbors' yards. And
so we're getting rid of it. We read about a plant that could be used as a pesticide. Do you remember which plant it was?
No.
I was thinking,
that came out of left field.
I'm sorry. I was thinking about how we get a lot of pests. We get a lot of borers, peach borers.
I'm not sure even a side planting would stop the borers. That's the trouble with the borers is they get down into the tree and there's not much that can affect them. It's not like aphids or other pests on the leaves.
Mm-hmm. We also have some good comfrey tea we can spray down the whole area.
We did a garden putting to bed this week. I took out tomato plants and melon plants, and pretty much everything else in the garden is down. The beans need to come out.
Yeah. But the garden's done, pretty much.
And all the trellises need to come down. If I don't have a new baby, I'll probably work on that this week as we'll be outside.
We'll see.
We'll see. All my plans are conditional right now.
Mm-hmm. So what other fascinating things we do this week? We live such adventurous and interesting lives.
We spent a lot of time talking about what it means to take God's name in vain.
Oh, yeah. We were going to talk about that in the last Ben and Laura show.
To make useless or to make nothing or to make false.
Right. Well, there's that passage that God says in the Ten Commandments, God shall not hold anyone guiltless who uses my name in vain. Obviously, his name is not God. So the discussion was, what does that mean? That's very serious. We'll not hold them guiltless. So we started looking up, what does that mean, taking God's name in vain?
Right. And now the paraphrased version of the Bible that I grew up with says, you shall not use my name irreverently.
Right. And that can be interpreted quite differently.
Right. And so when we looked up the Hebrew word, it essentially means to make useless or false. Now it's used again a few commandments later when it says do not bear, and it uses the same word testimony against your neighbor. We always translate that as false testimony. It's the exact same word. So it could be used as vain testimony against your neighbor, or you could say do not take the name of the Lord your God as false.
As false. Or empty, or to no use.
Or to make it useless.
Make it useless.
To empty it.
Make it pointless. Make it valueless.
Right.
And that's what the word vain means.
So
empty.
Traditionally, what this comes to mean is you should not speak God's name.
Well, that's the tradition, is that you just don't speak God's name at all.
At all.
Or if you speak God's name, you'd better be very careful.
It better be in only specific conditions and under specific times and places.
And I can understand that to a degree. We don't throw God's name around all over the place.
Well, to this day, I will refer to him as God before I refer to him by his name.
Right, but you don't want to be superstitious about it because it's not a magic spell or anything.
It's not even that it's superstition. It's just habit. Yeah. It's like if you've called someone Mr. Jones your whole life, and then you get older and he says, no, call me Steve. Mm-hmm. You're like, but your name isn't Steve. I've called you Mr. Jones. It feels disrespectful to call you Steve.
It's a little bit like calling your father. You don't go around using his first name.
You know his name.
You know his name, but you don't go around using that name. I would find it a little bit disconcerting if my children just kept calling me Ben all the time, or Benjamin.
But that is a traditional understanding of what it means to take God's name in vain. You don't throw his name around.
Mm-hmm. But God meant something a little more specific than that, because there was a tradition to swear by the name of God's name. Whatever God you worshipped, you would swear by that God's name. And if you upheld that name, you would keep the oath that you swore in that God's name.
It was a true testimony.
Right. It was a way of assuring somebody that you were going to fulfill what you said you're going to fulfill. And God actually commands his people to swear by his name. He actually says that prophetically someday, instead of swearing in the name of the false gods, you're going to swear by my name. So he doesn't.
It will mean something.
So he doesn't have a problem with somebody swearing in his name. He has a problem with people swearing in his name loosely, without either intentions of fulfilling it, or intending to fulfill it, but not being able to, or not really wanting to, or just not.
Well, we were noticing that one place that's really interesting is in the book of Ruth. When Boaz first comes out and sees Ruth gleaning in the fields,
Mm-hmm.
he greets his hired hands, basically saying, using God's name very freely and casually, basically saying, Yehovah be with you.
Right.
And they say, yeah, and may he be with you also.
Yeah, they didn't cover their ears and scream or anything.
Well, no, not only that. Okay, he's got guys working in the field. This is his construction crew. This is his foreman, and he greets them casually. It wasn't a holy day. It wasn't a holy greeting. It was a very casual greeting using God's name.
It would be like us saying, "Hi,
how you doing? How are things going?
How you doing? What's going on?"
Right. In the context of what he says, it is using God's name in a way that we would think of as casual
or irreverent, really.
Maybe even irreverent, which is. And Boaz was clearly not only a God-fearer,
Mm-hmm.
he seems to have been a good and a wise man.
He's also of the line of David.
So it seems that his use of God's name was not a violation of the commandment.
Right, and it did not seem offensive to God at all.
It didn't seem offensive to anyone around him either. It was a very common thing that he did. And it could be argued that, well, maybe the people weren't keeping that command properly.
Now, it is true, it's probably better not to swear at all. See, that's the difference.
That's what Messiah's advice was.
Yeah, so that's the difference between speaking God's name or swearing by God's name. You know, Jesus specifically says, Yeshua says, don't swear at all. And the reason he says that is because if you swear something and don't fulfill it, you're actually damaging the name that you swore in. You know the phrase swear words? And you say swearing? We think of the words swearing as profanity,
curse words,
bad language. But really swearing is not. It's pointing the finger to something and saying, by this, I will fulfill this. Or
it's like when you put your hand on a Bible and raise it to take an oath before you testify.
Right.
You know, I do hereby swear.
Do you remember the story of Jephthah?
That I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Jephthah
swore by the name of God that if God granted him victory over this battle, then the first person who walked out, or the first thing that walked out to greet him, he would sacrifice. Now that was a hasty vow.
It was also foolish.
He really should have thought that one through, because the first person to walk out, or first thing to walk out, was his own daughter. But what's fascinating is that he fulfilled his vow anyway, because he did not want to take the name of the Lord in vain. He fulfilled the vow because he swore in God's name. Now, Yeshua taught, don't swear at all. You don't want to.
Let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. But that's specifically having to do with the name of God and not taking it in vain.
I suspect that was his advice, as to not take that name in vain.
So we have an example of Jephthah swearing in the name of God and not taking the name in vain. And we have the story of Boaz, who casually spoke the name of God and did not take the name of God in vain.
Clearly not, because of his character as shown through the rest of the story.
Right.
So our tradition that we've grown up with of, well, taking God's name in vain means speaking it irreverently or speaking it in common use, or just not taking it with the proper reverence that it deserves may actually be a slight tweaking of the commandment. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't reverence God's name, but it might mean that we're missing a much deeper significance in the commandment itself. And I do not think you should start going around saying God's name all the time.
No.
Clearly not, because I can't even do it when I'm talking and I'm intending to speak about God's name.
But we know God's name, and we ought to use God's name, or else we will be basically making it to naught.
That's the other problem.
If you know God's name and you refuse to speak it, how does anyone know what God you're worshiping, what God you're talking about? I mean, you could absolutely say, no, it's the God of the Bible. You say, well, there's a lot of gods in the Bible. Which God of the Bible? No, the God of the Bible.
The one that says the Lord, right?
Right, the Lord. But the Lord is not his name. So.
Yeah, if you lived in the proper time in England, you would have referred to the Lord as the guy who was holding the holding the land you worked.
Right.
So.
But taking God's name in vain essentially is swearing things by his name that you may or may not actually fulfill. And not fulfilling it would be taking God's name in vain. And God will not hold a person guiltless. It's because now his name is on the line. And it's a very bad testimony to anyone hearing it or anyone around you saying, you swear in the name of your God falsely? You don't have any interest? And worse than that, you deceived me. Oh yeah, I'll pay back the loan.
Yeah.
Don't go around saying I'll pay back the loan, as the Lord lives. That sort of thing. That's pretty serious. If you're going to say that, you better actually be doing it. The check's in the mail.
Right.
Don't be saying, as the Lord lives, the check's in the mail.
This came about because of something I posted on Facebook, and I rarely post on Facebook. I will comment, but I rarely post. And I posted something that was basically, it was a paraphrase of the whole Bible. And the running theme of it was that God tells people to do things, and people say they're going to do the things God said and don't do them, and that carries all the way through the Bible. And actually, I've seen the original post for that. It starts in Genesis and it goes all the way to Revelation. This one started, it was only a partial excerpt of it, and it started in Exodus. And at one point, the writer of this little synopsis said that God said to his people, and he used a 4-letter shortening of the name of God. So whoever the person who wrote the post used the YHVH version.
YHWH, I think.
I think they said V.
But they're English equivalents of the Hebrew characters.
Right, the Hebrew characters without the vowels in them.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to his people, if you do these things, I will be your God and you'll be my people. And the people said, we will do the things. And God says, if you don't do the things, bad things will happen. And the people said, we will do the things. And God says, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my own dialect, I don't use that word. And now I've noticed that since we've been married that you use it all the time. And you use it as just, it's an affirmation.
Yeah. I approve. I'm happy to hear that.
That
is good.
A lot of people born about our age will use that word the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a slightly older generation, people who were perhaps born maybe 10 years before you, that word is associated with like hippies, people who aren't serious about what they're speaking. It's a word that's almost a profane word.
So the question is, if using the phrase cool in the context of I approve or that's good.
Right, showing God's satisfaction with the people's response.
And attributing that phrase to the mouth of God, is that irreverent, and is it taking God's name in vain?
I had a friend who was very upset by that. And basically told me that I was taking God's name in vain. I was violating the commandment. And I considered it for quite a while, and
we took that seriously.
I did not see it quite the same way she did, because to me that she said you're putting man-made vernacular in the mouth of God.
We do that all the time, though.
The trouble is that any Bible written in English is not the Word of God. strictly speaking, because he spoke it in a different language.
By that definition, you can't paraphrase the Bible. You need to basically write it in its original language.
You must write it in its original language and dialect.
Because you can never recreate it perfectly in English.
Right.
You're always going to have vernacular and expressions.
Right.
Otherwise, we're not going to understand it.
And actually, the King James Bible is translated with vernacular that has had to be updated because it became so obscure that we couldn't understand it anymore. So the vernacular of the King James Bible, which was translated from the Hebrew that God spoke, has been brought forward into modern English in a lot of different Bible versions that I know my friend does not have difficulty with.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, she had difficulty with a word used in a dialect that she does not use, and to her that was terribly offensive, to the point where she would challenge me openly on it and say, you are doing something that is not right. You are doing something that is bad, that always sets me back. I mean, it's one thing if a random person on Facebook argues with you.
But it's someone you know and respect.
If it's someone you know and love and respect, then it's a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how we ended up spending a lot of time this week talking about what does it mean to take the name of the Creator in vain.
Falsely. For deceptive purposes or to not.
In the end, I deleted the post because I love my friend. I'm not sure that I agree with her about the point that she was making, but the point that I was making is one that is important enough to me that I don't want it getting tangled up in a perception of how I was presenting it or how I was allowing it to be presented.
Now, I thought it was slightly humorous. I thought maybe what she felt was offensive was that it was slightly humorous.
Or lighthearted at any rate.
Or lighthearted, not weighty. Because we are talking about the words of God, and that's a very serious and weighty topic. Something not to be taken lightly. But if you really dig down to the message of that meme or that do the things,
that's not
quite serious.
It was tracing all through the Bible how the thing that keeps coming back to is God said, do these things. Mm-hmm. The prophets all said, you must do these things, or bad stuff is going to happen. The people said, well, we didn't do the things. God, bad stuff happens. This repeats for centuries.
It's not that God is vindictive and mad. They're not doing what he wants them to do. He's actually saying, I gave you these instructions for your own good, and you're refusing to do them. And now I'm watching all the catastrophes happening because you just won't listen to what I told you to do.
And you hear, it's like a father saying, you guys, just listen. Just listen. I told you how to get around this. I told you how to have peace and how to have joy and how to be part of me and how to have everything that I made you to have. Just do these things.
And we're still learning that ourselves.
Yes.
We're practicing. That's what Sukkot's all about, is practicing. We're not doing the things properly because it doesn't say anything about put your Ozark tent up in your backyard and put a few branches on top of it and call it Sukkot. I mean, I would hope nobody would look at what we're doing and say, oh, good job, Ben and Lauren, fulfilling the law perfectly.
No one's going to do that, so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, well, the one person who fulfilled it perfectly, he's the one that we rely on.
It did not say what he did for a sukkah.
No, it didn't. You would think if that was extremely important, it would be in the gospel.
It's funny, the gospel writers didn't see any reason to point that out.
Yeah, it is.
But
that is interesting.
They pointed out what he did on the water pouring ceremony. He went out and shouted in the middle of this really important ceremony, I am the living water.
That takes a lot of boldness.
So, we've had a lot of Bible discussion this week, and that boiled it down. And while it may have seemed like it took a long time, we're talking about hours of conversation.
But that was a conclusion we came to.
Yes.
And we had to look it up.
Well.
Because what does it mean when God... that's a serious thing. God says he will not hold someone guiltless.
It's right up there, right in the front of the Ten Commandments.
That's a big one.
Yes. So, I deleted the post. I am not sorry that I deleted the post. I wish I could have had a little more fruitful discussion with my friend. It felt to me like it was kind of more... It didn't feel to me like it maybe accomplished what it could have.
I got the impression that she felt you did not have the proper fear of God.
She did. And I don't know that what I was trying to say back to her came through the way I wanted it to. I have a feeling it's going to come across. I have a feeling that she's not going to understand the thought process or the heart that I had in answering her back. But life is not over. There are more chances for more discussions.
You do realize that at the end of Ecclesiastes, basically he says, fear God and do the things.
I do understand what she was offended about. I do understand her point. It is easy to underestimate the holiness of God and to get a little too familiar.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
well, I know the Jewish people, when they pray, Christians, we're used to using the phrase, our Father. And that's a very familiar, family. Hey, family. Father, talking to God like a father. But they add, our Father, our King. Mm-hmm. And that's done as a reminder saying, yes, he's your Father. However, he's also your King.
Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu.
Yep, our Father, our King.
So reverence him. Don't take it casually. I mean, yes, he's family, but he's also royalty.
He is.
And he's sovereign. He's powerful. And there's a lot that can be said about God, more so than just he's your Father.
And this is why we're going to camp out in a tent, even though it's going to be 39 degrees.
Because our Father, our King?
Because Avinu Malkeinu wants us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Our Father, our King.
Our Father, our King.
And we're honoring the Son of the King, too.
And I believe that the not taking his name in vain has more to do with taking what he wants from us seriously than any usage of the word that is associated with him.
Mm-hmm.
The name Yahovah is holy, but the commandments that he gave us and the things he desired for us are holier still. And to set those aside and to not speak his name because you have reverence for it, I think is losing a richness of understanding of who he is and of communion with him. And that makes me sad because I think that might be more important than whether or not we use God's name with the word cool.
Well, we say things like praise the name. We talk a lot about the name, but we never speak the name. So the question is, what name are we even talking about?
That's true. But more I was thinking that the commitment to want to do what the Father said to do, to want to do what our God told us to do, mm-hmm. It opens up a richness of understanding of him that I don't think you get simply by avoiding using his name.
Right. And really, that is tradition.
Right.
And, when you grow up with a tradition, it's very, very difficult to not follow that tradition.
Well, I haven't been able to break the tradition in this whole conversation. I still refer to our Creator and our Father and our King as God, which is not bad, but that's a title. It's not his name.
Well, people all throughout history have referred to God by different names. For example, the kingdom of heaven. We get this image of this kingdom up in the clouds. That's not really what's being talked about. The kingdom of heaven is God. It's the kingdom of God.
That was a euphemism referring to God.
Or when
speaking of man-made vernacular.
Well, when the prodigal son comes back and he tells his father, "I've sinned against you and against heaven."
He's referring to God himself.
Yeah, he didn't sin against a place. He sinned against God, who lives in heaven.
Right.
So even in the Gospels, or the word master, the word Lord is used all throughout the Gospel.
The Most High.
Phrases like the Most High. I use the phrase Most High mostly.
The Lord of Hosts.
Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of titles that God has, and they're all legitimate because they describe different aspects of who he is.
El Shaddai.
But God also expects us to acknowledge his holy name.
He does. But more so than that, he expects us to acknowledge the things that he wants us to do. He expects us to follow the way he set forward for him, or for us, because that is the way that we do what he wants us to do. And I think that that is the ultimate not making his name useless, because he sealed those things he wants us to do with his name and said, do these things.
Well, like the Aaronic benediction is when the high priest places the name of God on the people. But now that the name of God is on the people, their behavior is going to be a reflection of the name that's been placed upon them.
Yes.
So if they sin, that's a serious
That is the
problem.
ultimate making his name to nothing.
That's a very serious problem.
Yeah.
So, anyway, all of this to say that we are God-fearing people. And personally, when I read that and it said, that supposedly God says the phrase cool, I don't find that offensive.
But that's because in the dialect that you've been raised with and the vernacular that you speak, that was a perfectly normal, useful word. In the vernacular my friend was raised with and the dialect she speaks, that is an empty, idle, useless word.
But no, it has meaning.
Well, that's what she said it's the definition of an idle word.
I don't know.
So it's a dialect thing. It's
maybe
how
there's
you were
other
raised.
words that I would consider an idle word or an empty word.
Yeah. But we've gone
Anyway.
46 minutes.
I think that is probably over our time. But if you've made it this far, congratulations. Cheers and thumbs up. And
This is probably the last podcast without a baby in it.
Yep. Right now it's the Ben and Lauren show. Next podcast will be Ben, Lauren, and mystery named baby. Boy or girl, we don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll be a week late. Who knows? But anyway, have a wonderful night. Say goodnight, Lauren.
Good night, Lauren.
Bye-bye.